check. Okay. So I want to go over smart objects again really quickly, just as sort of a quick little shot here. So again, we talked about smart objects and what they are, and the way I want you to think about smart objects, again, this is an envelope, this is your image. If your image is sitting outside of this protection, whatever, you can fuck it up. You can transform it and destroy it. You can erase parts of it. You can change its color and break all that in. Do you guys understand when I say bake into an image what I'm really talking about? It's when you've made a change and you go ahead and apply it in such a way that you can't undo it. And that's for me what I talk about baking. So the advantage of a smart object is that you can actually put something inside of here and it's now protected. And we can do a lot of things to this envelope. We can transform it, we can make it bigger, smaller. It's non-destructive. We can't do things, certain things though that would actually are pixel level changes. So you can't paint on this guy, you can't clone stamp on it, you can't healing brush on it, you can't do any of those things because by definition it's protected. However, just because it's in here doesn't mean you can't take it out. You can take this image out, and once it's outside, you can do all of those things to it. You can clone it, you can do all sorts of, you can destroy it, you can erase parts of it, you can do all of that kind of stuff, whatever. And then when you put it back into this protective envelope, you have the fucked up version of it that's now being protected again. Does that sort of make sense, everyone? So I just want to make sure everybody's on board about this, because again, it just to make sure everybody gets this part. If you can, go ahead and open up, it'll just be an easy file to work with. If you could open up the castle again for us, that'd be great. I closed mine, so I'm going to open mine again. Probably the easiest way to get to it is simply to go to your file menu, down to Open Recent, and you should be able to find the file that we were just working on. Let me get my microphone on just a little bit. To the castle? Yeah. It doesn't matter. You can. It won't matter. Okay. So again, up to the file menu, down to Open Recent, and this was my version of the castle. So I'm going to open this guy back up. And you can see that I've got 3 smart objects here that are actually inside all of this, but just a couple things to sort of like keep in mind. So I'm going to turn off the bottom layer, and you can see the only thing that's actually showing now is the sky and the layer mask. Now, in doing this, there are times where we want to, again, I've said this before, for some reason, in some part of your all's lives, not all of you, but a lot of you, you have been taught to remove this layer mask. So I want everybody to do this with me. Click on the layer mask and simply drag it down to the garbage. And when you do that, you will see in this case that it simply threw it away. Again, the reason it simply threw it away is that you cannot make a destructive move on a smart object. So we're never offered the option to actually apply that layer mask. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. In this case, I want to make a duplicate of this layer. Now, I'm just going to make a duplicate the normal way we do it. I don't need to make that special version of the smart object because I'm also going to turn this into a normal layer. I'm not going to keep this as the smart object layer. So to do that, simply hit Command J. It will make a copy of it, and this is again a copy of it. But remember, this is now a clone. Those 2 top layers are referencing one single smart object. What I want to do is I want to make the castle layer that's on the top editable. I want to make it so that I can actually clone on it if I want to, or paint on it if I want to, or do any of that stuff. So to do that, you come up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects, down to Rasterize. That's one way of doing it. So look up at my screen, up to the layer menu, down to Smart Objects, down to the bottom Rasterize, or up to the layer menu, down to Rasterize, over to Smart Object. Again, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It doesn't matter how you do it. But when you click on that, you'll see that that little logo goes away. The little Smart Object logo, it's not there anymore. And I can actually paint and work on this layer. I'm going to turn off the eyeball of the one that's underneath. And then I'm going to throw away the mask on the rasterized version. So I'm going to drag the mask down. And this time I get presented with a dialog box. And it says, do you want to delete the mask? Do you want to cancel this operation? Or do you want to apply the mask? If we hit delete, the mask is just gone. And we lose any of the effect that it was having. If I hit Command Z to undo that and bring it back, then I'm going to throw it away again. And this time, if you hit cancel, then it just undoes, nothing happens. But if you hit apply, this is a destructive move. And you can see that the castle is now, the whole bottom part is simply gone from the image. And if I didn't have the image underneath this, whatever, I would have done irreparable damage to this guy. And so not a good option for me. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm actually going to throw this away. I'm throwing all this away. So I'm going back to my original image. And I'm going to turn on everybody right here. So let's say at this stage of the game, you like what you've got going on here, but you want to now do some global changes to this. You actually, the problem that we've got right now is that we've got 3 different layers that all have content on them. And so for us to go in and actually do work on them as if they were one is impossible to do. Right now, number one, they're all 3 smart objects. And number 2, it's if I do some work on the cloud layer right now, it's not going to have any impact on the castle. I have to go down to the castle layer to actually do work on that, whatever. So instead, I want to actually merge these together, but in a non-destructive way. So to do that, you want to select the very top layer. So we've got the very top layer selected. Again, this is going to be one you are going to have to write this down to begin with, but it is something that we are going to use over and over and over again. So you'll hear this all over and over again. It's the most complicated keyboard shortcut in Photoshop, I'm convinced. So this is what it is. It's either hold down either the Command or the Control, depending on if you're on Windows or Mac. Hold down, so anyway, I'm going to hold down Command, the Option key, the Shift key, and hit the letter E. So again, Command or Control, Option, Shift, E. And what ends up happening is that it will give you a merged version of all of that at the very top. And this thing is something you can now clone stamp on, you can paint on it, you can do anything in the world that you actually want to on it. However, you've got all of the images that are actually, the things that actually made this are all sitting underneath this guy. Does that make sense to everybody what's going on? Yes? None. None. Good question, though. All right. We can throw all of this part away. You do not need to save that. Okay. What is the single best selection tool in Photoshop? I'm sorry, what? Channels? Tool. So this is when you know you're going to either love this or you're going to hate this. Sorry. How many people in here have ever used the pen tool? Love it or hate it? Oh, everybody hates it. Everybody hates it. Just admit it. You tried to use it. You thought it looked cool, kind of what it did, all that. But in the end of the world, you're like, fuck, no way. I hate this tool. I hate everything about it, right? The sad truth of it is, though, it is the single best tool for selections, making selections in Photoshop. So I'm actually going to show you how to use the tool in a way that is relatively simple to learn and works really, really, really well, really well. The reason that the selection tool, the pen tool, is such a good selection tool is that it employs your intelligence. It employs your eyes. You know, a lot of us times we look at edges and we can see the edges, and you go to use one of the selection tools for Photoshop and it gets close or it gets nowhere near, whatever, and you're thinking, God, that's so simple. I can't believe you can't just pick that out, but it can't. So anyway, so we're going to learn the pen tool, and I can promise you this right now. If you ask any professional retoucher, I don't care who it is, any professional retoucher, what their favorite selection tool is, what's the strongest, best, whatever, they will tell you flat out, it is the pen tool. Now, I know a lot of you guys have, when you start to actually make masks and are using masks, whatever, I see this happen all the time. You actually go in and you try to paint on a mask. You're just trying to refine the selection, a little bit like we were doing last week when we were selecting that girl's face out. And we got the hair really well using a channel, and we used a brush to actually get her arm and shoulder. But there was that one area of her cheek that it was almost identical in tone to the background. And there was no way to get that. So we went in with a paintbrush and we simply painted it out, right? And I have watched people do this before. I've watched them paint that out and realize they've made a mistake. So then they flip their brush. So if they were painting white on their layer mask to increase the mask, then they change their brush to black and they paint it back, and they just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And an hour later, they're still going back and forth and back and forth, trying to get that perfect edge. Where the reality is that it would take them 30 seconds with a pen tool, but they don't know how to use it or they resist using it. So I'm going to ask you to give in. Again, like I said, I'm going to show you how to use this tool. I'm going to simplify this in a way that makes the tool really, truly useful for you. So with that said, the file that I want you to open up is from this week. So you should know this. This is all, this sits, well here, let me do your version of it so my screen looks just like yours. Inside of this, there is a set of PDFs that are in here. The pen tool and path. If you want to take a look at this really quickly, again, you do not need to write this shit down. This explains everything I'm going to show you is explained right here in this PDF. So I'd really much rather you actually do this work with me than actually try to keep notes about this stuff, because it's all right here. If you have to refer back to it, it's all sitting right here. So it'll be easy for you to use. And that's all we're going to talk about as far as that part goes right now. So at any rate, the thing that I want you to find is it's a file called vicompath.tiff. If you could bring that into Photoshop, that would be great. Again, I'm going to double click on the hand to make this thing big, and then I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit onto the V. So again, holding down spacebar and command or spacebar control for Windows to actually zoom into this. And remember, just adding the option key gives you the negative zoom tool, so it'll allow you to move around like that. And also, if you just hold down the spacebar, you get the hand and you can actually move your image around a little bit. Now, this will actually happen to us a lot. I'm going to actually hit the pen tool. So it is the P key by itself, or if you can't remember that, it's over on your tools palette. It's right above the T key, which stands for text. It's just above that is the pen tool. And if you click on this and you get the little flyout menu, you will actually see you have options. You've got the pen tool at the very top, the freeform pen tool, the curvature pen tool, the add anchor point tool, the delete anchor point tool, and the convert point tool. This is the problem with the pen tool, right? So remember, I promised you guys that I was actually going to simplify this tool for you. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible tools. I'm going to tell you, you're never going to use one except for the one at the very top. So I just got rid of, let's see, 6 into 100 is 15. Times 5 is I just got rid of 85% of the problem with this tool for you, just like that. You're never going to use any of those other things. Nice, huh? Okay, so select the pen tool. It's the only thing you're going to use to actually do this kind of work right here. When you do that, you need to, again, look at your options palette up at the toolbar. So up at the very top, look at the options, and you will see there is a drop-down menu at the very top. And you have 2 options right now that are available to you. You have either shape or background. I'm sorry, shape or path. We're going to pick path. You want to make sure that that part is selected. A couple of other things that we need to actually set up. We're going to avoid these little icons that are in the top right now. We will look at those later. There is a little gear that sits here. You need to click on that little gear. It's a flyout menu, a drop-down menu as well. And at the very bottom, it'll say rubber band. You definitely want to click rubber band. You want to turn that on. I'll show you what it is and how to actually use it. The path is actually going to draw lines down on your image, and you can control not only the thickness of that path, but also its color. Now, I'm going to suggest that you leave the thickness right now at 1 pixel. There's very little reason, rarely, to actually change that, but you can actually make your line a little bit heavier, a little bit lighter. I'm going to say, please don't do that right now. In terms of the color, there's no reason to really change the color. The default is sort of like this sort of like normal blue. The only reason you would really want to change the color is if we were now working on an image that primarily was blue and you were having a lot of difficulty seeing where the line for the path actually was laying down. you can click on this drop-down menu and you could change it to a different color. So if I was having trouble seeing that, I would probably, if I wanted the exact opposite of this blue, yellow would be one of the opposite colors. You would just pick a different color that would actually be easier to see. Now, path tool lines are not, they're non-printing. They don't show up in any image. So this part is strictly visual, making it easier for you to see or not. And then finally, to get that flat-on menu to go away, remember, click on the word Adobe. You do want to put a check mark where it says Auto Add and Delete. And this is how you are going to work with the pen tool forevermore. So to do it, one last thing that we need to talk about. I'm going to say you've got the pen tool selected right now. You can see on my image it's a little crosshair. However, I'm not going to do anything except I'm going to move the tool till it touches one of the rulers on the outside. And you can see when you do this that you actually lose the tool when it gets to the edge of your image. It stops becoming the pen tool and it reverts back to the normal cursor, just the black arrow that we're used to in so many programs. I do not want that behavior to happen. The same thing will happen with a brush. Do me a favor, hit the B key to give yourself a brush. And I'm going to make my brush much smaller because it's gigantic right now. And you'll see that as you are hovering your brush over your image like this, it is the brush. But the minute you actually get your cursor to the outer edge, it stops becoming the brush. It becomes the cursor again. That can be problematic in a number of scenarios, and working with the pen tool is actually one of those scenarios. So to avoid this, we need to work on what they call the pasteboard. To get to that, you hit the F key once. No modifier, just the F key. When you do that, your image will now sit and hang out under this. Again, to move around the image, hold down the space bar, it'll give you the hand, and you can actually drag your image over and you'll see that there is an edge to it. We can make our image smaller. Double click the hand really quickly just to zoom it all the way back out. And now you can actually move your image around and you'll see that there's no longer, you don't have rulers any longer, you've got these edges, but now if you hit the B key to get a brush, you can not only be able to paint on your image, but when you come outside of your image like this, you can still paint all the way down on your image here. All the tools still work on the outside of your screen like this, and that part becomes important to us. It's not going to be really critical on this image, but it is going to become critical on the next one we do right after this. So just wanted you to be aware of that. To get out of here, to get out of the pasteboard and get back to, because right now you can't close this image. You'll notice that you don't have the little stop lights up at the top anymore. You don't have the red, yellow, green little thing up at the very top. I don't know what Windows does at the very top, but you lose all of that ability. To get back to the normal view that we are accustomed in working in Photoshop, you hit the F key again. That will take you to the black pasteboard. What this does is it removes all of your color palette, all of your palette, control palettes, that kind of stuff, and just shows you your image. And then hit the F key one more time, and you get back to the normal view. And I've got the little stop lights up at the top, and I can close the image, and I can do that kind of stuff as well. So in this particular image, I don't necessarily need to be on the pasteboard, but the next one we will. So I'm just going to get back and we'll just do the work on this image, and then we'll revisit pasteboard when we go in. So I want you to zoom into the V. Again, simply hit the P key to get the pen tool or select it over in your tools palette. And we're going to start here at the very top. So the crosshair matters on this. This is another reason we use precise tools as opposed to the little icons. You want to put the crosshair, for me, just watch my screen really quickly and I'll show you just what's going on, and then I'll let you jump in right away as well. I'm going to click once in this top corner and you'll see it lays down a dot, and you'll also see as I move, now I'm not dragging, I'm simply moving my cursor away. So I do not still have pressure down on my tablet. Oh, by the way, when you're doing pen work, do not use a tablet. The problem with using a tablet when you're doing pen work is, I hovered over this corner right here. If I was doing it with a tablet, when I go to actually lower the stencil, lower the pinpoint down onto the tablet, it will slightly move. And when I actually hit the tablet, it will not be perfectly on this corner. Whereas if I use a mouse is actually even better than a tablet. I use a mouse, I can hover over this, simply click once, and it will drop that point right where it should be. When I move off of it, you'll see that there's a line that's coming off of it. This is the rubber band. If you don't see this line, it's because you didn't turn on the rubber band check mark at the very top. And now you can see, as I'm hovering over it, the pen tool is still working, but I don't have that visual aid, that connection of having the rubber band. So I'm going to put the rubber band back on. Again, get rid of this. And then I'm going to come down to the lower corner of the V and click and put down another mark there. I'm going to come up to the top corner, again using the rubber band as a guide and the crosshairs. Click and put down another one. Come into the middle, click the lower part, click back up. And then finally, when I get back to the original point, you'll see my cursor changes. It does become a little pen icon with a circle next to it. That is simply an indication that I am completing the path. And I need every one of you to outline the V using the pen tool. And give me a shout if you run into problems. Come back up to your window menu, down to workspace, pick your retouching workspace, and then right back up to window again, down to workspace, and reset it. And it should be back up. All right, does everybody have the V? Are we good? Okay. Hold down the space bar to get the hand and scooch the image over a little bit so that you can go after the eye. And I want you to just do the exact same thing for the eye. We're just going to outline it. And again, kick over, holding the space bar down to get the little hand to move and do the A. And then again, hold down the space bar and come over to the C, and we'll stop when you get to the C. I'll let you guys catch up. All right, are we good? Okay. So when you guys open this up, do you have the same guidelines that I have on mine? I find those really annoying. So you have options here. Guidelines are considered extras. So you can hide extras. To hide extras, hold down the Command key and hit the letter H. And the first time you do that, you should get a little dialog box that opens up and says, do you want to hide Photoshop or do you want to hide extras or something like that? What did anybody get what does the dialog box actually say? Yeah, so you want to pick hide extras. There's no advantage to hiding Photoshop. If you want to hide Photoshop, you simply go up to the Photoshop menu and come down and say hide it. But hiding the extras there's an advantage to that because it allows you to do work without getting rid of it. So if you hit that hide extras, and then the little guidelines should have gone away, but if you hit Command H again, they will come back. If you hit the L key to get a lasso tool and draw out a selection, you will actually see you get the marching ants. These are extras as well. If you hit Command H, they are hidden, but they're still there. If you hit Command H, they come right back again. Command D to deselect. If you want to get rid of the guidelines, which is fine, you don't need them for this image, but if you want to get rid of them, it's up to the View menu, down to Clear Guides, and it will get rid of them for you, and you don't need to worry about it. But the Command H, the setting part of that is the best. If for some reason you made a mistake and you selected Hide Photoshop instead, you need to reset the entire preferences of Photoshop in order to get that behavior option to come back. And then the first time you hit Command H, you'll be able to pick Hide Extras. So, but at any rate, all right, I need everybody to watch this now. Watch my screen. Do not try to do this. Some of you, now I've got to admit, some of you, anybody in this room a big Illustrator person? Adobe Illustrator? Well, but even if you go like that, I know you work with paths all the time, so it's just what the program is built on, right? So there are people who their path work is far better than mine. you can continue to do your path work whatever way you want to do your path work as long as it really works for you. But it's everybody else in this room that I'm concerned about who hasn't done a ton of work in Illustrator, who's going to be doing it in Photoshop. You're the people that I am trying to reach. All right, so it's going to start out pretty much the same way. I'm going to start down here in the lower corner of the C, and I come up, sorry, click. Fuck, this has happened to me before. Yep, thanks. I'm going to come up to the top, and I'm going to simply click at my corner up here. And then here's the trick. So again, please watch this. Don't do this yet. Just watch what happens. This is how I'm going to approach this. There are people who are good enough that they can actually describe this entire arc in a single point. Don't be one of those people. We're going to break this up. I'm going to refer to this like the side of a clock face. So instead of coming all the way down to 6 o'clock and trying to describe this arc, which I may or may not be able to do, I don't think this is a real perfect circle, so it would be iffy. I'm also not going to come down to 9 o'clock and try to do it from there, even though it's a possibility I could. I'm going to come around at like a 10, 10:30, something like that. Bite off small chunks of this. And here is the trick. So watch what happens. You click your mouse down or your tablet down or whatever it is you do. You need to hold it down. Continue to hold it down. Drag in the direction that your path is going to go. So my path is going to go from here, starting down in this direction. So again, you click in the direction of your path. You do not click the opposite direction where you came from. Your path will never work. Again, click and drag down in the direction that your path is going to go. Now, the shorter your line is, so you can see I've pulled out control handles. The shorter your handles are, the greater the impact that they have really close to the point that we're dealing with. The longer your handles are, the more they impact the starting point where we actually came from in the beginning. Your job is to actually simply visually play with this till you get the right amount of length and the right amount of tilt in here so that your path describes that line, just like I've got going right now. It's sitting on that line perfectly. Let go. Bring your mouse back up to the center point. Hold down the Option key and click once, and it will get rid of a second control handle. The second control handle is the reason people do not use the pen tool. This, in effect, now is allowing me to start completely over, which is great. And then I simply continue the process. So I'm going to come down around 7 o'clock, click and drag in the direction of the path, make sure that I'm getting the arc described. Let go, come back up to my center, my midpoint, hold down the Option key, get rid of the second control handle, and then finally come down to the bottom and do the same exact thing. Come back, click to get rid of the second control handle. And then at this point, I'm back to the way I was when I was doing the V and the I and the A. It's strictly, I'm coming up to the top, I'm not clicking and dragging at all. I'm going to set down one point. And then finally in the center, again, don't get too greedy about where you do your point, how dragging out too far. You don't want too many points, you don't want too few points. I mean, that's basically what I'm trying to go for. Hold down the Option key, get rid of the second control handle, come up to the very top, do the same thing, come back to the center point, click and get rid of it, and then finally close your path and actually angle the line out. And that is how you do curves. So I need everybody to do the C, and when you have problems, I need you to yell at me and I'll come over and we will get it to go.
So, and then we get like the outer curve of the C, but then when it goes back to the bottom straight line of the C, it doesn't want to go back to being a straight line.
That's because you're clicking and dragging. Stop clicking and dragging. I'll show you. By the way, other things about it, just so that you know, if you screw something up, this is another thing. There are all sorts of tools that you can use in that drop-down menu to fix points, move points, change points, all that kind of stuff. Do not use them. If you screw something up, simply go back in history to the point where you undo what you screwed up and start from that point on. That eliminates so many of the issues that people have with Pen Path Tool. is that kind of work. Again, you're not trying to, if you make a mistake, stop at that point. Don't try to figure out a whole nother set of tools to fix it. All right, so you're there, fine.
Okay.
You need to hold down the Option key, come back to the middle, come down to the middle, and click on that point to get rid of the second control handle, and then let go and just do your next line.
Oh.
Is this working for everyone? Yes? Okay. So I'm going to let you guys finish that part. Hold down the space bar. You'll get the hand. Come over and drag your image across to get to the O. So with this case now, we're going to actually do 2 paths to do this, and they're going to be nested inside of one another. And the trick to doing this correctly is that you always want to start on the outside and work your way in. So we do not want to do the circle in the middle first. You actually want to create the path on the outside. Once it's finished, then we will come and create the path on the inside. And Photoshop will understand what it is we're actually doing, and that these two are actually indeed the second one that we do for the center part, whatever, is intended to be nested inside of the first one. So I'm going to start at the very top and do the very same method we just did. Click to set a point, come across, click and drag out till the line gets described along the arc, come back up, hold down the Option key, get rid of the second handle, and work my way all the way around. You guys can do the same thing. And when you're finished doing this, you can then simply start on the inside. The unfortunate thing about the pen tool is you have to pay attention. I always thought it would be fun just to get all, you know, if you're faced really with that daunting, okay, God, I've got to do a million paths for this image, that you just get all fucked up and watch a movie or something. Problem is you can't watch the movie because you got to pay attention to this. Okay, so I've got mine at least complete through the O. You guys should be pretty close to that. If not, just sort of, well, I'll give it a second here, but we need to look at some other things here because there's a number of issues now that we've gotten this deep into it that we need to think about and consider and deal with. Is everybody sort of good on this? Okay. I need you to go now, if you look at your palettes, again, remember we had our layers palette, but right next to it was the path palette. And I want you to click on the path palette and actually take a look at what's going on. Now in my case, again, I've got big thumbnails. I've tried to encourage you guys to use big thumbnails because you can actually see quite a bit of what's going on in this thumbnail. If you chose not to listen to me then, you might want to actually do this now because this really will help. Come over to the little 3 bars that are right across to the right of the tab that says Path. Click, you'll get a drop-down menu. Come down to Panel Options, it'll open up, and click the radio button right next to the largest of the icons, and you'll actually have something that you can see and really sort of begin to work with. Number of things that are really important about this. And the first thing that's important about this is that you can actually see the work that we're doing on this path, and most importantly, this thing is named Work Path. There is a liability in this work path that you need to be aware of. Now, this has taken us a certain amount of time to actually do. I want you to leave the path palette visible. I'm going to hold down the space bar to get the hand just to come over, so I'm going to do the M next. But before I do the M, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click underneath the word that says work path in this area. And you'll notice when I do that, you no longer see the path. If you bring your cursor back over and you look, the paths are no longer visible. They're not active. And the reason they're not visible is that, much like a layer, we don't have this thing selected, so you don't see them. If you click on the work path, you will see the little blue lines come back on there, but you don't see any of the points on there. That's okay, we'll deal with the little points later. But the big issue about this is that you can have an unlimited number of paths of these sort of like layers of paths, but when it says work path, that is a temporary issue, and that is the part that will bite you in the ass. So what do I mean by that? Again, click underneath it so that you do not have work path selected. Hold down the space bar to move over so that we can start working on the M, and simply click on the M, your first point, and look what has happened. Work path is temporary. Work path only holds the work that you are actually working on. So the minute I clicked on that little point to start to do my M, all the VIA, all the Viacom, before I got to this, whatever, went away, because that was all on a temporary work path. Again, I would consider this to be a mistake, and so instead of completely recreating the work that we've already done, simply go over to your history palette and click one history step back when we actually just closed the last of the paths. And you can see now that you've got the VIACO back. That's great. I want to save this work path so I can continue to work on something else. To do that, you can simply double click on the word that says work path, and it will open up a dialog box and say, what do you want to call this? And I'm going to put in what it is, the VIAC. So AC, and hit OK. So that's one way to save a work path. Another way to save the work path, again, if it's has to be active, it's selected, go to the menu that's on the right-hand side of the path tab and click on the drop-down menu, and you can actually save your work path here as well. So I can't save this because it's already been saved. That's weird. Save, it doesn't even show it to me here. Hang on one second. Yeah, it changes here. You can see because we've already saved it. But if I started another work path here, this would give me the option to actually save this guy. So I'm going to throw this guy away. You can throw work paths away, by the way, like I just threw that one away. So I'm going to do the M on a completely separate path here. So I can start out, again, instead of having the top one selected, I'm going to click underneath it, and I'm going to simply start the process again. So I'm going to click on the bottom and start to go up, and you see it builds that temporary workspace called work path, and it's going to let me finish the M. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the M. You guys can do the same thing. It's all straight lines. There is no clicking and dragging. While you're actually got the tool in place, you can temporarily just hold down the space bar to get the hand, move it, the image in place so that you can actually get to the parts that you want to get to. And I'm going to finish the M. So now I've got the M, and again, the other way to save this is you can come up to the little three menu lines here, and now you do have a save path option. If you click on that, again, that very same dialog opens up and it says, what do you want to call it? I'm going to just call it M and say OK to this. So now I've got the VIACO on one layer, and I've got the M on another layer. Again, if I click underneath this, the M goes away. I don't see it. However, if I click and make the M active again, you'll actually see that the outline of it's still there. You can copy and paste paths as well. So with the M selected, simply go up to the Edit menu down to Copy, or if you want to use the keyboard shortcuts for Macintosh, that's Command C. Copy, and then come make your top layer that's got the VIAC on it active, and do a paste, and it will actually paste that path into the top one, and we are good to go. Now that I've got them all on one path, I can grab the M and I can actually throw it into the garbage. So again, you can do all of those sorts of things. If for some reason I need to make a duplicate of my paths, all of them, you can simply click on the path itself, and drag it down to the little square at the bottom that's got the square with the plus in the center, let go, and it just makes a copy of it if I need to do that. I can throw the copy part away. That part all works great. But to see how effective this is, I am going to make the path active again. So the top layer is active. I am going to hover over the thumbnail, hold down the Command key and click, and it loads it as a selection, just like loading selections from channels, loading selections from layer masks. This hovering over the thumbnail, holding down the Command key or Control if you're on Windows, and clicking loads this as a selection. Then I'm going to go back into my layers palette and I'm going to go all the way on top. So I'm going to select the Viacom layer. I'm going to then add a blank layer on top of that by simply clicking on the icon at the bottom that's square with the plus in it. And then I want to fill this one some decent color. So I'm going to click on my foreground color and we're going to fill it with red. So I'm going to click across my R value and put in 255 for the red. Hit the tab key, put in 0 green, tab key 0 blue. That gives me a pure red. I'm going to say OK to that. And then again, because red is my foreground color, hold down the Option and hit Delete, and it will actually fill that with red. Command D to deselect. Double click on the hand, and you will see what an incredible job that did. What?
Can you do that one more time?
Sure. Pitch that away. So I'm hovering. I've got my path is finished. Hover over the thumbnail, make the whole guy active, hover over the thumbnail, hold down your Command key, and click. It's just like loading a selection like we've loaded selections for the last 3 weeks. Did you get marching ants?
Yeah.
Perfect. Go back to your layers palette. Select the very top layer. I need a blank layer on top of it. So I'm clicking on that simply to add a blank layer. What's your foreground color? It's red. Fine, then, all right, so then click on the foreground color picker to open it up. Type in 255 for R. Hit the tab key, 0 green, tab key, 0 blue. Say OK. And then to fill with foreground color, it is always Option, backspace, Option, delete. Command D to deselect, and folks, you can't get a better selection than that. Sorry, it just can't be done. Okay, a couple of tricks about this stuff that we need to actually look at. Turn off, if you've done this whole Viacom thing, filling it with color, turn it off because we can't see our paths to actually work with them. I'm going to go back to my path palette, and I'm actually going to select it by clicking on it. And you'll notice that all of the paths are actually, they show up, but they still have all of their control points, and we can modify those control points. So I'm going to zoom in to the V again. There's two things that will actually control paths in the pen tool. And finally, they've actually got these close to one another. In older versions of Photoshop, the tools that you use to select these points were an entire tool away from the pen tool. So thank God they finally put it in the right spot. But right underneath the pen tool, you'll see, and depending on what you've last selected, there is an arrow. In my case, it's a white arrowhead pointing up. If you click on that drop-down menu, you'll see there's two of them. There is the path selection tool that is a black arrow, and then there's a direct selection tool, which is a white one. I want you to select the black one first. So with the black tool selected and your path actually highlighted, the one that we've been working on, come over and simply click anywhere on the V, and you'll see that it gives you the little, all the points show up on it again. And they're also all in blue. That is an indication that they are all active. You can now actually use this direct selection tool, the black key, click and drag, and it will move your entire path. And you can see I've moved my entire path off of the original outlines. You can hit Command Z to undo that. If you want to actually then click another part, another path, because we've got separate ones going on here, whatever, hold down your Shift key and then you can click on the eye and it'll actually make the eye selected. And now they're both selected. Now when I click, so the V and the I are both selected, you can see the little points. We can click, they both get moved as we drag them around. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. If you want to deselect these points, the easiest way to do it is to simply, you can click right outside of it. Then all of the little points go away. You'll still see though that everybody is still showing because the whole path is actually active. If you want to fix a mistake, so let's everybody look at my screen really quick. You can see I can spot one mistake that I've got up in this top corner right here. You can see that this corner that's right up here is it's not really perfectly on that. The problem is that if I use the black-headed tool and click on this, it selects the entire path. And if I try to move this point, it simply moves the entire letter. That's not what I want to do. Command Z to undo that. I'm going to zip back out just a little bit. Instead, what you want to do, and I need everybody to watch my screen here really quickly to see what's really going on. So I want you to see this has been selected using the black arrow. However, all of these points are blue, meaning when I move one of them, they all move together. That's why the whole letter moves. If you want to select just a single point so that you can change it, it's the white-headed tool. So come down to the direct selection tool, the white-headed one, and now look what happens. I'm going to click on this top arrow right up here. I want everybody to look what happens to the point. I'm going to click on it. The point that I just clicked on stays blue. Everybody else turns white. Actually, I think it's transparent is what everybody else does. This means that the only point that is going to move is the one that's right under the tool that I just selected. And you can see, you can actually modify where it actually stays, and I can clean that part up. And now I'm actually good to go. If I feel like that the point that's in the crux of the V is also slightly off, if I click on it, the point that was up in the corner goes from blue to clear, and then the only blue one that is selected down here, am I actually able to move and actually get it to be better in place. Let's say that for some instance or for some reason the top of the V was the entire thing needed to be reset. You can click on one of the corner points, so it's now blue. Hold down the Shift key and click on the other corner point. These two are now blue. Everybody else is clear, meaning these things will move just by themselves and nobody else. Everybody else stays anchored in all of that. Does this make sense to everybody about this? Are we good on this part? Okay. The big challenge of all. Dovetailing. So if you come over to the V, I'm sorry, the M that's at the very end. This is a challenge that we come up with doing selections of any kind. Is we've got to, if we make a selection of this right now, we want the negative of this. You see the spaces that are sort of like form the teeth in here? What I want to do is I want to make a separate path that actually traces the lines that are inside here, but that fit perfectly with the original path that I've already got. Does that make sense what my goal is? So I want to create another path that actually traces the negative space that's in here perfectly. But I've already got a path in there. So you can create a new path. Simply come down, click outside of this. So I'm clicking outside of, again, in my path palette. I can simply start a new path right now. I can click here and start to do a new path, or I can click on the little menu on the fly outside here and I can create the new path before. So instead of getting a work path, which is temporary, I can simply create a new path, and I'm going to call this Dovetail. And say OK. And now when I start to work on this, I don't need to worry about it being a temporary workspace. This is a path that will be saved. By the way, your paths are saved, so if we were to save this file right now, close the image, open it back up again, these paths are all intact. So we don't need to worry about that part. But I'm going to ask you guys right now, I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool. What is the likelihood that I'm going to be able to trace this path inside here and have it be perfectly matching the path that I started with? That chance is 0. There is no way that that is going to happen. I can get close, but there's no way those things are going to be perfect. All right? So what do? I'm going to throw away the dovetail thing here because it's not going to help me. I'm actually going to completely duplicate this path. Now, there's a couple of things that I can do here to duplicate it. I've selected this. I actually want to select, I'm just going to duplicate the whole thing. I'm going to simply drag the Viacom down to the little plus. It duplicates this entire path. Then I'm going to zoom out. You can see all of the little buttons are actually being selected. I'm going to grab my direct selection tool, so the black-headed arrow, and I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click outside of this first to get rid of all of those points, and then simply click on it again so that I can select them all. I didn't want to select everybody. I just want to select this. I'm going to click and drag across everything except for the M, and you'll notice when I do that, that I get all the little points on here. When you are doing something to change something, you need to be able to see these little points. So in this case, they're all visible right now, and I'm simply going to hit the delete key, and it gets rid of all of them. So I've now got a separate M on its own path layer right here, and I've got the Viacom that's on the part up there. So this is the beginning of what I want to actually do to create my dovetail. I'm going to double click on this thing instead of having it say copy. I'm going to call it Dovetail. And then I'm going to go after the direct selection tool, the white one. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click on the path. And you'll notice when I just clicked on the path that everybody is clear. So there's no change that will happen to any of this. What I want to do is remove the parts of the path that are not going to create my dovetail and leave the ones that are common. So this part right down here, the whole lower part of my path here is the common part. But this part that's up at the top is not. So I'm going to select the point at the very top and hit the delete key, and it just removes that line, and it's all that whole segment. You can see both of these have gone away. I'm going to click the one that's down in the middle now. You'll see all the other points go clear. I'm going to hold down the shift key and click on the top point, on the one that's up at the peak, and hit the delete key. It gets rid of all of those. So now I've gotten rid of all the parts that were making up the M, but I still have all of the segments that are going to be common to my dovetail. And then I simply hit the P key to get the pen tool, come down, and I'm just going to start, I'm going to pick up the path. And you can pick it up anywhere. I'm going to pick it up in this corner right here. You could pick it up in the opposite corner there, but I'm just going to pick it up here, click, and come down, and I can then come back here and finish my path. That is now my dovetail. Does this make sense? And to see if it worked, I'm going to command click to load this as a selection. I'm going to go back into my layers palette. I am going to activate the Viacom layer that we already did. I'm going to actually change my color from red now to green. To get green, I'm going to put in 0 red, hit the tab key to go to green, put in 255 for green, tab key, leave blue at 0 and say OK. And then again, green is my foreground color now, option delete, command D to deselect, and it is a perfect dovetail. Are we good on this part? Terrific. You can throw the Viacom away. You do not need to save that. The next thing we're going to do, and we've got to get this done in class, this is not part of your homework, but this will go a long way to actually dealing with what your homework is going to be. So I need you to go back into the folder from today, and there's a file in there called M_7027. There may or may not be an XMP file with it. It doesn't really matter. But I need you to open that guy up. Again, it's a CR2 file. It looks like this. I'm simply going to open this as a smart object. The work that we do here, you don't need to worry about whether this is a smart object or not. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'll open this up as a smart object. So This is where the pen tool comes in really, really well. This is an extremely difficult selection to make, and I'm going to show you guys, because this is now the practical work that a pen tool will do. But I should let you know about this ahead of time. So, in India, they have massive factories of people who sit at a desk, just like you're sitting right now, and do nothing but path work. That's all they do. They do it all day long, 5, 6, 7 days a week, however long they work. Paths are so critical to professional retouching, you cannot begin to imagine. And so people who hate to do the work spend the money, they send their images to one of these factories, and they come back with paths in them. So I have a friend who used to do, he shot cars, and whenever they would do anything for cars, every single thing had to have its own path. So they would send a path, they would send it to one of these factories in India, and when I say everything would be outlined in a path, I mean everything. Every bolt had its own path. Every nut had its own path. Every section of the antenna had its own path. Every spoke of the wheel had its own path. Everything. They came back with millions of paths, all categorized, all organized, all of that kind of stuff. But that's how important this stuff is. It wasn't just the parts of the car. It was actually all the shadows and the highlights on the car had their own paths as well. I'm telling you, it's no better way in the world to work than this tool. So don't dismiss it. So at any rate, we're going to knock out this girl using a combination of pen tool, and because clearly I can't do her hair with a pen tool. So that's going to be our job. That's going to be where we're actually going to start working on this part right now. But this was one of those cases where I said we actually need to use the pasteboard. Because if we zoom in, I'm going to start here in the lower part of her skirt. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom, and I'm zoomed in at about 100%. Now, you can do, path work can get really, really, really crazy if you zoom in too far. You do not want to be working at 400 or 500%. You'll be in too much, and your path it'll take you forever to actually do it. You don't want to be in that close. But by the same token, you don't want to be at 25. Again, all of this is depending on the resolution of your image, but you don't want to be at 25. You don't want to be doing your path work with your image at this scale right here. It simply won't be precise enough. So in my case, I usually find myself working in that 100 to 200% range. This is 100% right there. This is 200 right here. I'm feeling a little bit better about 200. But the problem is that when I hit the P key to get the pen tool and I come down here and I want to start my first selection, my first point down here, the problem that I run into is that the minute I actually touch that bottom line, it becomes the cursor again. It's no longer the path tool. So if you hit the F key to go to the pasteboard, you will then see now I've got a place underneath that I can get to. I can hold down my space bar to get the hand and set this up so that I can actually start. I'm going to actually start my path completely outside of the image. So I'm going to come down here at the, I'm underneath it all. I'm going to click and set a point down so that I can come in to this edge that I'm actually going to try to make and go on my way up. But before we do this, you need to ask yourself a question. Everybody is going to expect the best way to do the pen tool is to make the path perfect. It should go right along the edge of this skirt and it'll be perfect. However, that's not the reality of what we normally do. A lot of times you make a slight error in one way or the other. And the thing that you need to keep in mind with this is that, well, here, I'll show you this really quick. I'm going to actually start the path work right here. So I'm going to click and I'm going to come up. And instead of making it perfectly along this edge, hang on one second, I'm going to err slightly to the inside of this. So I'm going to start and I'm going to continue my work up here, and I'm just going to do this really, really, really quickly. And then I'm just going to complete this selection. So let's say that's the entire skirt that I've made. So I am going to then use this to mask this part out. So I'm going to load this as a selection. Command click, I get the marching ants. I'm going to come back to my layers palette and I'm going to add it as a layer mask on top of this. Now, when I do that, you see the skirt, but you do not see any of the background, correct? So do you know that skirt got chopped off? Do you know that I'm missing part of that skirt? No, you don't, right? I'm going to undo that. Hit Command D to deselect. I'm going to throw this path away. I'm going to do the same thing again, but this time I'm going to make the error on the outside. I'm going to include part of the background. So again, I'm getting really close to this, but I don't really quite have it. And then again, I'm going to finish my path. Command click to load this as a selection. Go back to my layers palette and add a layer mask. And you can see the problem. I've kept part of the background. You know now that I've actually knocked this out. When I made the mistake and actually lost part of the figure, it's not that big of a deal. But if I make a mistake and I keep part of the background, it defeats the whole purpose. This is unusable. Does this make sense, everyone, what's going on here? Are we good about this part? All right, I want to show you one last thing in here really quickly. I'm going to get rid of this, and then we're actually going to do this as a path. So far in this class, we've talked about the straight lines. You click, straight line, click, straight line. There are no straight lines in the real world. Everything is organic. So even though I think that this first first part of this leg, poor choice of word, the first part of this skirt here is like straight, you still want to put a little bend into it. You still want it to make it slightly organic. So this is how I'm going to do it. Watch my screen and then I'll let you guys do it because I'm going to show you a couple things here really quick. I'm going to click a point to set it on the outside. I'm going to click, and again, I'm going to start up. Don't bite off more than you can chew. At this point, I could simply click and then start again, but that makes a perfectly straight line in this path. Those things don't exist in nature, and if you actually do your path work that way, the resulting selection that you make will look like it'll look artificial. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, I'm going to put just the slightest bend in it. I'm going to click and drag out just a little bit and put just a little pop in it. That's all. And then I'm going to let go. Now at this stage of the game, as long as I can continue, as my edge stays on that line that I'm dragging, as long as this is continuing, I do not need to get rid of that second point the way I showed you guys when we were knocking out that Viacom. I do not need to come back here, hold down the Option key and get rid of that. All I need to do is continue to click and drag up, come up here, click and drag up. It's just a much faster way. Now, when I get to her fingers, it's all going to change. But at least at this stage of the game, I've come all the way up to the top of that. I'm close to her hand. I don't have a single straight line that's actually doing it. I'm slightly into the skirt, which is where I want to be, instead of slightly into the outside edge. But then what happens when I get to here, and I've got to deal with the fingers? What a lot of people will do is they will click on the fingers here, and then they'll do this. They'll continue. They'll come up to this part right here, click again, and drag up. They'll come up to the top where the skirt actually meets the cuff. I'm going to zoom into this so you can see. Then they'll come down here, click and drag out to form that shape. And at this stage of the game, you are no longer going in the direction of the path. So now you do have to actually hold down the Option key and get rid of that second point so that you can continue to do this part. And again, this one is that handle to control that curve is no longer going in the direction of my path, so I need to get rid of this part. But then you come back here and you're fucked because you're back on top of the path again. And this is what I was telling you guys. You need to do the entire outside first. This area right in here is inside, just like the inside of that donut was. So instead of trying to go back and using the direct selection tool and all of that kind of stuff to get rid of all these points, simply use your history. Go back in history to the last place where that screwed up. I'm now back in history and I can click on this finger, which is where I really need to be doing it, and then go ahead and finish my path selection here. Last thing I will tell you before you start on this is that a lot of people feel like that the space between your fingers, if you do a V like that, is actually a sharp point. It is not. There is a curve that's in here. So again, I'm going to zoom in even more so you can see this. I'm going to set a point right here. I'm going to come across to the other side, click and drag to get the curve that describes the inside of her finger right there. and then continue on my way. Again, I've got to lose this control point because I'm not on a straight line here. So Option to actually get rid of that guy and continue to work out again. Are we good on this part? All right, so I need you guys to outline the girl. Do me a favor. When you get all the way up to this part where it runs into her hair, you need to stop. But other than that, I'm going to do the same thing you guys are. And if you start having trouble, shout out. People ask me where to put points. Last thing I'll show you, look here really quickly, Command Z to undo that. Where to put points. The tool is designed to do curves. Do not. Look at my screen really quickly right here. I want to use this tool to describe the curve of her fingertip. You don't want to put a point right in the middle of her fingertip. You want to put a point on one side, then a point on the other side, and let the tool describe that curve. If you put a point right in the middle, you disrupt that smoothness of that curve. So I always say this, last thing I'll show you really quickly. Look at this screen here really quick. You won't see it on the video, but you'll hear it. I always think of hills and valleys, hills and valleys, hills and valleys, hills and valleys. So if we do hills and valleys, you do not want to put your points here and here. You defeat the whole purpose of this. Instead, you want your points on the side of the hill so that it will actually do the description of the curve. Then you would come down here. Again, my next point in this group right here would be right here, so that I describe this point would go here, and then a point here to describe the curve. So I'm always looking, I always say I'm always looking for the sides of the mountain. Make sense? All right. We need to do this as quick as we can. This is where a 2-button mouse would make your life considerably easier. Again, if you make a mistake, use history to fix it. Little things like this, one last time. Sorry, look at my screen again. See there's that little bump out of her thumbnail right there? If you blow right through that, your paths don't look believable. If you add that, it's little details like this that make your path work seem completely believable. So don't get lazy. And again, just hold down the space bar, you get the hand and scoot your whole image down a little bit and just keep right on going. Okay, you guys just pause where you're at. In all likelihood, unless you're really good at this already, I'm going to jump ahead of you. I just want to show you what happens when and if you do reach the hair on this side. So I'm actually up at the hair. I'm going to back out to show you really quickly what to do. Again, we're going to use a different method to select her hair. So I'm all the way up at the corner right here. I'm simply going to come straight across her body. Don't worry about going across her face, whatever. And what I want to do is I want to reach the point on the opposite side where the hair ends, and just start my path and continue it here all the way down the other side. So you guys can keep right on going.
Can you do that one more time?
Yep. So I'm all the way up. My path tool has come, I've come all the way up this side of her body. And I'm at the point right now where I've run into her hair on this side. I can't continue the path tool around this. There's no way I can select hair using the pen tool. So I'm going to come simply across to the other shoulder, to the other collar that's right over here, and I'm simply going to start and run my path down the other side. All right, one last time to look up at my screen really quick. So I'm now at the edge of this. So just to orient you where I'm at, this is what my pen tool is sort of looking at right here. I'm at the point where her arm actually leaves the frame of the image. That's not a problem. Remember, we're on the pasteboard right now. Your path points can work completely outside of this. So I'm going to go completely outside of this, and I don't try to make this hard. I'm bringing points around so that I can line up so that my attack coming against this bottom part of the arm is actually easy for me. So these points out here don't mean anything. They're just, I'm using them to actually get back to a place where I want to start, and I'm actually going in the direction that I want it to start. So the pasteboard you do not need to worry about. And then one last time up at my screen. So at this point now, I've done all the path selection around her. And then again, I just need to get back to my original point. So I'm just doing big points away from this till I get back to the initial point that I set and I completed my path. So where are you guys at? Are you at least up to the first lapel? Are you at least up to this side over here? I'll give you another couple minutes. All right, so I know it's maybe going a little slower for you guys than for me. I've only done this for 1,000 years. But is this working for, is anybody having problems with, I mean, slow is okay, but is this working for you guys? Yeah? Okay, it doesn't matter where you are. Most of you are going to be along the left side of this girl. That's fine. Simply come all the way over to the right side, click a point, and then come down to the bottom, click a point, and then come back just to finish your path. You don't have to trace the whole other side of her or anything. It doesn't really matter where you are on the right side either. You'll get the whole sense of what's going on. But there's other work that I want to do with this just to sort of complete this whole part. So no matter where you are, just come over to the far right-hand side, out into the pasteboard, and come down and finish your path. I don't want you to cut through her body or through the middle of that part. All right, everybody good on this part? Okay, so now remember, this thing that we've got that I just did all that work on is called a work path. That is problematic for me because the minute I actually make, if I select out of this and do another path and start another path, I lose all of this. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to double click on this work path. It brings up the dialog box to save it, and I'm going to call it body. And say OK, and now it's actually named, so now it's protected. If I save this file, close it, open it back up, that path will actually always be there. Now I need to talk to you a little bit about how, so I've told you that this is the best selection tool. In some ways it's too good, and this is what I mean by being too good. So just watch my screen really quickly. You can do this yourself if you want to, but watch my screen just to show you. I'm going to load this thing as a selection. So again, hover over the thumbnail, command click, loads it as a selection. You see I get the marching ants, but look what happens. I don't get marching ants that come out into the pasteboard, but it is this girl completely selected, which is great. I'm going to come into my layers palette and I'm going to add a new blank layer on top of this. So I'm simply going to add a new blank layer on the top. And I'm going to go back to my default foreground and background colors. To do that, simply hit the D key, not Command D. That will get rid of the selection. Just the D key. It defaults it to black and white. And I'm going to fill this with black, just so that you can see the edge of this. So again, Option Delete, we'll fill that with black. Command D to deselect. And I'm going to turn off the bottom now, so that we can just take a look at this. And I want you to take a look at this edge. So this is the edge of my pen tool, and you can see it's perfect. It's actually too perfect. Look at how sharp this edge is. The trick to doing selections in Photoshop is to have some transition, and this has got zero transition in it. This is only moving from, in our case here, transparent to completely black. There's no softness to this edge. You need to take just that little bit off of this edge. So to do that, I'm going to save this one right here. I'm going to call this sharp. And I'm going to do the same trick again. I'm going to come up to the path palette. I'm going to hover over the, again, the body thumbnail, hold down the Command key, click. But this time, before I actually fill that, I'm going to soften this edge a little bit. To do that, come up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Feather. And in the feathering for this guy, I'm going to put in a 1 pixel feather. Again, the number of pixels, the radius that you put in here is completely dependent on the resolution of your image. If you've got a gigantic, really high resolution image, it's going to be more than 1 pixel. If you've got a really small, somewhat image, it's going to be, it could even be less than this. It can be 1/10 of a pixel or a 1/2 of a pixel. You're never really going to know. You just pretty much have to try it, trial and error. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that as well. And then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to add another layer on top of my sharp layer. I'm going to turn off my sharp layer. And I'm going to fill this with black as well. And I'm going to call it Command D to deselect. And I'm going to call this soft. And then take a look at the difference in these two. If you want to go back and forth between two versions of your image really quickly, the best way to do it is your history palette. And the reason I say that is that right now, in order for me to show you the difference in these two, I've got to turn this layer off and this one on, and you don't really have that sense of going back and forth. So instead, I'm going to just leave the sharp layer on. I'm going to come over to my history palette, and at the bottom of my history palette, there's a little camera. I'm going to click on that little camera, and it's going to offer to give me a snapshot in history. And basically what it is going to do is it's just, what did your screen look like when you actually made this? And I'm going to call this the sharp version and say OK. Then I'm going to turn that eyeball off and click on the soft one, and I'm going to do another history snapshot of that and call it soft. And now I can actually go to the top of my history palette, and you'll see I have two states up here. One is sharp, one is soft, and I can simply click back and forth between them. And you can see the difference in the quality of that edge. The softer edge here, taking that little part off, makes this more organic. It's more the way a camera would really work. It will blend into my background better. It will not look like I cut it out with an X-Acto knife, blah, 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 blah. Does this make sense to everybody, what I just did and how I did it? Are we good? All right, I'm going to throw both of those away. I don't need them anymore. I do have the body. It's actually working for me. I'm going to go ahead and create a selection for it. So to do it, I'm going to Command-click on my thumbnail of my body of the path. So again, Command-click. I am going to feather it. So up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Feather. I think the 1 pixel worked well. So that's now actually softened. And now I'm going to save the selection. Up to Select menu, down to Save Selection. We've done this for 2 weeks now. Call it Body. And say OK. Command D to deselect. And now you'll see that down on the bottom, I've got my body image, and that part works great. What I don't have is the hair. And I need to actually add that part to this. So I'm going to use the method that we used last week. I'm going to try to get it using channels. That's the best way for me, I know, to do it. So I'm going to come back up to looking at my whole RGB guy. I'm going to look at the red channel, and again, what I'm looking for is contrast along the edge between her hair in the background. I don't care about her body. I don't care about her face. I care about this edge, and I want is the maximum contrast between her hair and the buildings that are right behind it. So this is what the red channel looks like. Not great. Green channel looks a little bit better. Again, the edges of her hair are still very light. Building was a little bit darker. I don't care about the interior. And then the blue channel. And the blue channel actually lightens up those buildings in a little bit in the background. So for me, the green channel is going to be the best one to go with. So you guys can do this with me right now. I've got to admit, though, we've got 7 minutes to finish this. So I'm going to do this step by step. If you can keep up, that's great. If you get lost, it's not that big of a deal. This is not your homework. You'll be able to watch the end of this on the video. But I want to get us through to the end so that you can really see this whole thing put together. Oh, we're okay on that? Okay, so I'm simply going to duplicate the green channel. And then I'm going to zoom into here. Same trick that we did last time. I'm going to lay down points using my color sampler tool. So I'm going to grab the color sampler tool. I'm going to drop a place right here. Again, I need something that I know needs to be completely dark. I'm going to drop a point right there, and then I'm going to throw another one on the building right up behind her. I'm going to change the readout of my points from K to RGB, both of them. I've got the building at 83, so I've got the hair at a 225. I'm going to hit Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. I'm going to grab my black point slider first, and I'm watching my point number 2. That's the one that's on the buildings, to try to get that close to 0. So I'm going to dial it in. I'm going to get close to 0, like at a 6. I'm going to go to my arrow keys and tap that in until I just get to 1. I'm going to grab my white point slider and pull it back till I get close to 255, but not quite there. So 253, go to my arrow keys and tap it in till I just get to 255. Before I say OK to this, I want to look and make sure that I feel good about the transition. So I'm turning my preview on and off, and I'm feeling relatively good about that part. It's keeping a lot of that fine hair part. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. I like the way that part looks. I need to clean up a few things right now. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, make it a little bit larger. Make sure that my brush is completely hard because I don't want to spray out into the background. I'm going to leave my brush as a normal blending mode. White is my foreground color, and I'm simply going to clean up this area that's close to my edge but is not actually hitting my edge. So I'm going to just go through these parts right here. the front part of her face. Again, I'm staying away from her nose, away from her lips, away from the other part of that coat that's actually down below her right here. I'm going to come across into here. All of that part, I can just pretty much clean all this up. I've now got a relatively good selection in the very middle of her head that needs to be all white. So instead of painting it, which will take me too long, I'm going to go to my lasso tool by hitting the L key, and I'm simply going to circle this area that I know needs to be white. This is now a selection. White is my foreground color. Option delete makes that white. Command D to deselect. I need to fix her nose and her lip area right here, so I'm going to change my brush, again the B key, from normal to overlay to protect that background in the back. I'm not going to change, I'm going to soften the edge of my brush just a little bit. Again, the overlay mode will protect most of that black background, and then I'm simply going to paint across those parts a couple of times really quickly. I know that that part of her collar needs to be selected as well. I can go back up to normal, and again, a completely hard brush to fix this little part right here. That's good. I'm going to do the same thing on this other side over here. I'm fairly certain that my brush picks up, my path picks up at that part. So that part looks good to me. The only thing that I have left that I don't really like is there's parts of the building in the background that are still showing through. So I'll show you how I'm going to cheat this. So again, I'm going to go to a brush, the B key. I am going to make it an overlay brush. I am going to change it to a medium % hardness here because I'm going to sort of cheat this. I'm going to hit the X key to get my brush, my foreground color to be black. Because again, I need these backgrounds to go black. And I'm going to sit there and click and pop this part out. Now, if I lose some of her hair, you'll never know. But that for me is actually gets that part. I'm also going to fix this part right here. And this part right here. And this part right here. And the rest of it seems pretty good. I'm going to zip back out a little bit more. I'm going to go to a regular brush now, just to give myself a little more breathing room. I don't really need a lot of it, but normal brush, make it a completely hard brush. Again, I don't want to overspray into any of the work that I've done. And I can simply clean up to give me a little bit of room around this. That's all I'm really looking to do. And I'm in pretty good shape right now. So this is just her head part right here. Make sure that that's not something on my screen. This is the head part right here. This is the body part right here. I need to add the head part to the body part. How do I do that? We don't have time to debate that, so this is how you do it. If I command click on this, I've loaded it as a selection. Command click loads it. The white is the most selected area, little marching ants. I'm then going to select the body. Use a very large brush. White is my foreground color, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. You don't really need to worry about the edge of this because the selection is controlling this. And I'm simply going to paint in the selection. Remember, the selection is controlling what I can paint. Command D to deselect, and I'm done. Do not lose sight of what selections mean and what they do. If you make a selection, then whatever you do is restricted inside that selection. And this completes my body knockout. So let's see how it works. So I'm going to command click. So this is the whole thing. This is what it looks like. This is the piece that I actually built. I'm going to command click to load this as a selection. I'm going to come up to our layer right now so we can see the whole thing, and I'm actually going to add an adjustment layer. I'm going to add a black and white adjustment layer on this. And you see when I do, the girl actually goes black and white. Now, I don't really find that all that compelling, but if I invert my selection, I do find that very compelling. All of a sudden, I've got a black and white background, and the girl is in color in front, and she is really popping. But look at this edge. Can you tell that was done with the pen tool? This is flawless. This is a mistake right in here. I didn't actually add that cutout in my path. So remember, my path looks like this, or here. My selection looks like that. So I would go back in and fix that part. But nonetheless, this is what I got going on here. It gets better. So I really want this girl to pop off of this thing. So the black and white thing, it did a good job on that, however, but you can still use this even further. I'm going to select, again, load the girl as a selection. So she is actually selected right now, and I'm going to then put another curve on here, hue saturation curve. And again, this will only impact her, and I'm going to drop the saturation on her down just a little bit. I'm going to load this again as a selection and put another curve on top of this. And this time I want to make the background really dark. Again, if I drag this down to actually make things dark, it's affecting the girl. I want to affect the background, so I'm going to invert the curve. And all of a sudden, this is the image I've got. And you cannot do this any other way, kids. But look at the quality of this. This is fucking flawless. Are there questions about this? So this is a combination of both. It's what we did last week and what we did this week. But look at this. I'm going to do a history snapshot of this guy as well. So just to sort of see where we're at. And then scroll up to the top and take a look at the difference. So this is where we were, and this is where I am now. This is control. This lets you do anything you want to do. Are we good on this part? Okay. It's pretty self-evident, whatever. The assignments for next week, there are, just to show you really quickly, there's an image, this image right here. You're supposed to knock this out using pen tool. There's a Coke path. You're supposed to actually trace. I'll show you the Coke path. It's just a Coca-Cola path. You're going to trace this using the pen tool. And then there's a metal face, and you're going to actually outline this face. For the face and for the image here, you are to put them on this metal background. Again, it's really evident in the assignment. You won't have any problem. Are we good on this? Are there any questions about this? All right, I'll see you guys next week.